Welcome, welcome. Welcome to another edition of Mental Maintenance. It has been a very long time since I've actually talked to you guys. I figured that, I kind of come back to doing this show. So we've had some major changes that's been done, mainly from this Croco's Corner side. You are going to get mental maintenance, and I'm actually going to start another show called Croco Cares, where we're going to talk about just some of the more um, just some of the more immediate things that are happening in the world. Kind of doing a little bit of a deep dive as somebody who doesn't know, is not necessarily educated on some of these matters, but is looking to constantly and properly educate myself further on those matters, and just figure that I just kind of include you guys in that. So just kind of look forward for that show. It should be coming relatively soon. In the meantime, I'll probably start doing just some like weekly news caps. It'll be under that Croco Cares part, but don't expect those are me shooting from the cuff. It's not anything that is specifically researched. But there will be research bits that will be included in that show. It's just obviously they're going to take a little bit of time. I got to actually do the research. So they'll actually take a little bit of time. But getting back to this, we are doing mental maintenance again. So I'm going to be starting this episode off. And what we're going to do is we're going to go into empathy. I'm going to let the music play a little bit while I just get myself together. But yeah, the focus for today is going to be empathy. All right, thank you guys so much for joining me. I just got to get something to drink here. Sorry, I'm a little congested. The weather's starting to change a little bit, and yeah, I guess you could say starting to get to my allergies. So if I do happen to kind of sneeze or cough or anything like that, please forgive me. It's just kind of getting used to it, you know. But beautiful thing, getting good weather, nothing to be complaining about. Very, very happy about that. All right. All right. So again, what we're going to be talking about today is empathy. We're going to be thinking about what exactly that means. A lot of people tell me oftentimes that they view me as being more of a empathetic person. Empathy, the idea of, considering, understanding, if not understanding, just at the very least, I feel considering exactly what another person may be going through. And just kind of having grace with them in regards to that, having grace in regards to the situations that people face, even if it's not a situation that you yourself personally face. Um, do we have enough of it? I look at everything that's kind of happening in the world right now. You look at the wars, you look at, all of us trying to recover from post COVID, and, there's a lot of companies and a lot of just different entities and things that have just kind of lost money. You look to recoup those things. You exist in this world where it's a very dog eat dog world. If you are a business and you want to stay afloat, then you got to kind of do certain things to make sure that you do. You got to take certain liberties to make sure that you do. And I think just, not only with the companies, which are huge, I at least feel they're a huge influence on us and how we move and how we act, especially because we work with a lot of these companies. We work with a lot of these institutions, governments included. We work with a lot of these things on a daily basis, and to say that none of the methods and systems that exist in those spaces don't have an impact on us. I just think that that's a little bizarre. I know it's something that, you know, most of us probably want to look at or probably want to consider. Schooling too, for the younger people listening, you're kind of involved in these systems as well. It's not something where anybody is per se excluded unless, you know, you're a elderly person whose memory is more or less receding back into an infant state, or you are in fact an infant. Everybody, I feel like, with a conscious mind, with a somewhat educated mind, even, that, you know, we're the forces that act upon us have some form of an influence on us, which is one of the reasons why I wanted to start this show in the first place. Is just because, you know, I feel like it's a good idea to just have more thought and conversation regarding these things, and I wanted this to be a space for that. And I think one of the biggest things that impacts us in this regard is our sense of empathy. I think that is something that we do all have. I do still see people express it. Um, I think I see people express it every day. So I'm not trying to talk about empathy as if it's this thing that's dead. I don't think that it's dead. But I do think that we don't necessarily reflect on it enough. And myself, I'm included in that as well. You know, again, people might say that I'm very empathetic, but I do. I was talking to my buddy today, and we were talking about the idea. Anybody who knows me knows I'm a very spiritual person, at least in a sense of the Christian beliefs that I was kind of born and raised upon. I've kind of found my own place in it, and so I talk to people who kind of feel that same way. And one of my buddies happens to be that in that same space himself, and maybe even in a more focused and called light than myself. But he was discussing how, you know, you have to continue. One of the things that it says in Genesis when speaking about Jacob is this idea of moving forward, not being too worried about um, the things that uh, could kind of get in your way, but more so working within your faith and having faith. And part of showing your faith is in how you move forward and what it means to move forward. And I think that that kind of applies with me in regards to my empathy as well. You know, it's something where I can even myself move forward within it. So I don't exclude myself when I say I think we could do a better job. I think that I'm included in that as well. And just trying to think about, um, you know, what exactly it means to be empathetic. Um, Again, I kind of gave that definition. I won't run through that definition again. It was a loose definition. I'll actually, instead of running through my definition that I have, let me just pull up here the actual dictionary's version. Let me see, what do they want to give me? Okay, so this is from Oxford, and empathy is defined as the ability to understand and share the feelings of another. I would say that you don't even necessarily. I think that that is probably for sure how, you know, yeah, you should. It should be an understanding if you can get to that point, but I don't think that it necessarily has to be definitive that you understand that person's said feelings. I think it's just more important that you acknowledge it, at least have some type of tools built in for yourself to be able to acknowledge it, to be able to acknowledge um what another person is going through or what another person may be feeling. You know, when you're I where is there a time where we should be empathetic is kind of what's popping off in my mind at this current moment. Um, I think that I think that is kind of something that should move with you, almost like organically within your life. It should be something where you just kind of do it. You look towards doing it. But again, we all kind of fall short of that. Um, but you know, examples of where you should show empathy, you know, with your friends, family, coworkers, things of the such. You know, if you got that moment where somebody is upsetting you or frustrating you, instead of necessarily yelling at them, putting them down, putting them in a worse position, ignoring them, these may, you know, you might not be inserting empathy in regards to what exactly it is that they might be going through that's even causing those things. A lot of people say, well, that's none of my business. And again, that's why I said I don't even think you have to necessarily, for the people who say that, my counter is going back to what I said before. I don't think that it's necessarily the biggest point is that you have to understand exactly what a person is feeling or understand exactly what a person is going through, but just being able to acknowledge it. If somebody is having a hard time with a relationship, it might not have any input or impact on you, and it really is in a lot of cases none of your business. But you still can empathize with, wow, that person emotionally, there might be going through something as a result of that breakup that is actually impacting them now. So where maybe I can look towards where I can take some of the weight off their shoulders in regards to that situation versus, okay, well, it's none of my business and you're supposed to be doing this, so you should just go ahead and do this. Like, you can have that response, and for the most of the world, most of the business, most of the familial guidelines that we've had, you wouldn't be wrong. You don't necessarily have somebody that's going to put you down for saying, I just minded my business and did what I was supposed to do, and I was expecting that person to do the same. Like, for the most part, I don't think anybody's going to criticize another person for that. But it's not a matter of who or how you get praise or where you're going to get praise or where you're not going to get yelled at. Instead of looking at it from more or less those black and white constraints, where I say we should be challenging ourselves more is looking at the kind of gray area of it. It's like, regardless of if I'm going to get, I'm going to morally get a bad feeling, or if I'm not, or if I'm going to literally get a reprimanding in regards to this, or if I'm not, I don't think that you necessarily have to hold it to that. It's just more or less, well, what might actually help this person right now. It's just taking the less selfish route. When you look at it from the black and white constraints of, well, it doesn't matter because it doesn't matter if I don't respond to this with any positive reinforcement or in a more positive direction, because I'm not going to get in trouble for it. If I were to get in trouble for it, then sure, I should take this route. If I'm not, though, I don't care. I can just be like this. Going away from that, when you're like that, I think you're putting yourself way more. You're giving yourself over way more to the selfish side of yourself. And you don't have to necessarily give in to the selfish side of yourself. You can give in to the selfless side of yourself. And I think what happens as a result of that is you start to see people and processes and different things work a lot better and a lot smoother when you actually try to interject those things, take yourself necessarily away from the situation, and instead put that person into play, put maybe the larger things around that person that you have a direct connection or relationship to. You put those things in the forefront and think about what maybe is the right thing or what maybe would be the best thing to do. And that then goes back to having that empathy. If you can interject that empathy in regards to that situation in that moment, then you're helping them, you're helping if any relationship or situation that you're in with that person, and ultimately, because you're helping those two other things, you are helping yourself as well. These are things that even though I just said, we don't want to look at things necessarily from this black and white side of like, am I going to get in trouble versus am I going to get praised? I do think that if you are looking for the outcome of gaining more praise, then it would make more sense for you to kind of consider it this way, because you're not just helping yourself in this case, you're helping that person and the situation. Whether this is family, whether this is business, whether this is friend groups, whether this is whatever, you're doing more of a service as opposed to a disservice in your selfishness that lacks the empathy, that side of you that chooses to go away from the empathetic angle in the situation. Yeah, sorry, that was a lot. I feel like most of the times when I talk, it's like, do you even get a breath in? And I know that I'm not the only person that feels that way, but others too as well. But yeah, just kind of thinking about it from that perspective, man. I feel like right now is the reason why I wanted to start the comeback for mental maintenance with empathy is because I just look at the different wars that we have going on around the world right now, and the idea of when you take that lack of empathy and really stretch it upon a national level, or a countrywide level, the harms that kind of can come from those things, and uh, the impacts that they have, not just on that nation and the people within that nation, but to people across the world. And uh, we constantly show that when we do take on these more selfish behaviors and these more selfish outcomes, it costs people their lives, it costs communities their lives, it costs communities their cultures. And I think that's where we end up getting a lot of people who kind of they punch back. You start getting people wanting to punch back. People want to be more so from that side of the empathy. They rather see us have the result of the empathetic side versus have the result of the selfish side. It tears us down. We don't feel good about it. And again, you just see so much of this in the world right now. You really, really do. More reason why I think that this is the discussion that I need to be having more so than even want to have. We just don't see these things in each other. That, at least right now, it doesn't feel like there's an abundance of it. Now, I do feel like I've seen and I've witnessed the people that have come into contact with me express empathy, and I can almost say this for every single day of my life. I'm not trying to say it in this way of it being removed, but it definitely is something where I don't feel, and I feel like most people would agree with me, there's not a huge abundance of it. We're not thinking about our neighbor. We're not thinking about what the next fellow in the next, even just in a localized space, like the next fellow in our community is feeling. It's like, I don't care. All I care about is satisfying what is going to make my life easier, and everything else I can just choose to ignore. And I think if we just opened ourselves up a little bit more, gave ourselves a better grasp of understanding the feelings of other people, acknowledging, again, going back to, if we can't necessarily understand it, just acknowledging that it's real and that it exists there for another person, and the grace that we maybe can have for them in understanding that. These are things that we can do. We can increase, we can have more of an abundance in, that I don't think that we have now. I like to give a little bit of pushback. I do. Sorry, I just gotta get something else to drink here really quickly. I do like to have a little bit of a pushback though. So while I am arguing for this side, while I do believe everything that I just said to you, and I would like for it to have some type of impact on whoever is or who is choosing to listen to this, I do want to give the other side the pushback. And so right after just this sip of water, I am going to go into, are there any times where we shouldn't express empathy? All right. Thank you guys for hanging in there for that. Are there any sides where we shouldn't express empathy? It's a tricky question a little bit. I do think that empathy is something that should walk with us as much as our breath does. But I don't know if you necessarily have to always show this. There are instances where, people, the action in regards to why the person is feeling or acting the way that they do, it may be one that can be unjustifiable. I think you don't necessarily completely shut off empathy in this regard, but you need to prioritize where exactly that empathy needs to be in. So you can understand why, as an example, if a person is, if a person is defending their home, and in the midst of them defending their home, they are very violent in nature, as an example. You can have empathy and understanding, like, okay, well, I understand this person they've gone through a lot of things with theft. They've gone through a lot of things with violence. They've gone through a lot of things, with regard to their home that they're trying to, their best to protect. But if they're choosing to follow that up with violence, then you don't have to necessarily have empathy in regards to, trying to understand their feelings for having that violence, but in having empathy and understanding that, okay, this person has gone through a lot and they're trying to protect their home. You can the way that you can respond from the empathy that you have from that is to simply see what solutions can possibly be introduced, so that way this person does not have to go through the concern of protecting their home to this extent, but that can be done without violence. Again, see, when you take the proper side in regards to how you are empathetic to what another person, what another community, what another nation, what another whatever is going through, if you take that in and you're looking at it from the positive side, what happens is you start to interject more positivity into their solutions as well. So if you have the empathy to understand where that person's pain starts, and even if you don't necessarily understand their solution towards it, you may want to introduce a solution that you can understand, and that could not only change the situation around that person's home, the individuals that's involved in that, but also impact that community, and also impact that person's home, also impact that person, and ultimately it's leaving you, if you're, within proximity to that person enough to where you are having a moment to express empathy, you making that situation better for yourself as well. But I don't think you necessarily have to empathize with a person when there's negativity involved. To just kind of sum it up, negative actions can be solved through empathy, though. The deterrent of negativity, and negative courses of action, empathy definitely is in the toolkit of that, I believe. But you don't have to empathize with people's negativity, with people's violence. You don't have to. I don't. At least in my opinion, I don't think that you do. But in understanding them more so than understanding their reaction, finding the empathy for the person or the entity themselves, as opposed to for the violence, or for the negativity that is a recourse from their actions. We can do that, but I think that that's maybe probably the best example, or at least the best one that I can give, as to when there's a time that you don't necessarily have to be empathetic to that. Are there any other times that pop up in my head? Uh, do, 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 do. No, not really. I think that pretty much sums it up. You don't have to empathize with evil. You don't have to empathize with negativity. Those are things that I just don't. If you do that, then what you do is you become ignorant to another situation that you could have possibly empathized about. That's why I think that it just doesn't work for negativity and evil, and and you know, bad just bad courses of action as a result to how a person feels. I don't think that you have to. That's not something, because then you really do. You start tiptoeing a line where it's like, am I justifying, which in turn means that I'm ignoring another person or another entity that may be close or also tied to the situation. It's not. Whenever you practice empathy, it should be something where you can empathize with person A, but you also can, if person A is having an impact on person B, you are at the same time not neglecting having empathy for person B. It's where there's a bridge. Empathy is a thing where it's supposed to create like a bridge between the example of person A and the person B. So you like, it's two roads of empathy that empathy should pair off from there. But it shouldn't be something where it's just like, oh, it's directed towards only person A, or oh, it's directed towards only person B. When we start doing that, then there's another part of you that is ignoring it, and you aren't allowing yourself to constantly be in empathy. Which again, I think that that's ultimately how we should want to be. We should want to be able to try to empathize with as many people as we can, as many groups as we can. I don't think that you can do this perfectly. I don't think that there's a world that exists where you are supposed to do this perfectly. I think that's why all of us still struggle with it, including myself. But if you can kind of put yourself more in the direction of it being something that you do regularly, like a person may have to, like, if a person has an anger issue, they may have to practice breathing to prevent themselves from getting to the point that they do. They say, I've actually heard people say this before, whether they have anger through anxiety or just anger as a switch in their head. It's that, it feels like I can't breathe. So when you go to professionals and such, they oftentimes recommend that person who suffers with that anger, like, focus on their breathing, focus on themselves in that moment, so that way they could pull themselves out of that anger. If a person is going through that, they have to constantly focus on their breathing, so that way they can prevent themselves from escalating to the next step or to that next level, which is anger, which is something that at that point, if they're talking to somebody about it, has had negative consequences on their life. Kind of want you to, I'm just kind of saying we should maybe look at empathy the same way that person who struggles with keeping their temper and anger in check has to maybe resort to remembering and focusing on their breathing as a way to centralize themselves. Use empathy in a way where you take it with you in those situations that you may face, where you might have to actually consider another person. You might have to consider another community. You might have to consider another group. Just kind of bring that with you, so that way you can create that bridge that empathy does form, either with that person or with that group and yourself, and with the broader community and the broader people that are around you and that person in that moment that you should have that acknowledgement. Yeah, I hope that I'm gonna pretty much wrap up here. It's been about 30 minutes, getting a little bit close to it. I'm going to just kind of play some music to lead you guys out of here, but it's just something to think about. I think it's just like I said, all I want for these shows to be is something where it gives you an opportunity to just kind of think about, even when was the last time you thought about it. So in this case, empathy, and then maybe just give you a little bit of a perspective in regards to how to think about it in different ways, or maybe think about it in the same way, but just kind of give yourself that reminder. So I hope that you guys enjoy. Like I said, we're getting to about 30 minutes here, so don't want to keep you too long. Just wanted to give you that little bit, and thank you again for joining us for another edition of Mental Maintenance. Again, we will have Mental Maintenance on Croco's Corner. We will have Croco Cares, a new segment that I shall be introducing in the near future to you guys, so be on the lookout for that. And as well as that, we still have our comic book and geeky things, but they aren't going to be housed under Croco's Corner anymore. You're going to want to find that at Squad Nero. Anybody who enjoyed my anime takes, my comic takes, my Marvel MCU, and my DC DCEU takes, and just kind of want to stay up to date with anything anime and comic book related, I ask that you go over to Squad Nero Podcast. You can find us on Twitch, T Smooth Entertainment. Smooth does not have an E in it. You can find all of these things on the Squad Nero Podcast Instagram page. That is SQUAD Nero NERO. Let me just take a look really quickly here to see if I got that right in regards to, how we, sometimes we have those little, Squad Nero Podcast. I was thinking it was like a underscore or something like that, but no, just Squad Nero Podcast. Again, SQUAD Nero NERO Podcast, PODCAST. Again, you could check us out on Instagram to just kind of get more information of where you can watch our shows. We're on Twitch at Smooth Entertainment. Again, guys, just kind of be on the lookout for more mental maintenance shows. And if you like this type of stuff, or you want to kind of hear me talk about more specific areas of the world, and just the different things happening around the world, and just kind of get an education along with me on these matters, tune into Croco Cares. That should be coming soon. Thank you guys again, always.